ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
The assassination of the Hamas leader, Yahya Sinwar, the architect of the October 7 attack, might have been an opportunity for a ceasefire in Gaza. Instead, Israeli airstrikes have intensified in the north, and there's no sign Hamas will agree to the return of hostages. Today, writer and international relations expert Rajan Menon from the City College of New York on Benjamin Netanyahu's ultimate aim. I'm Sam Hawley on Gadigal land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily. Rajan, a lot has been said, of course, in the last few days about the death of the Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar. The drone image of him sitting in a chair just before his death is incredible.
What we know from the Israelis is that there was a trainee reconnaissance team that happened upon him. He was above ground in an apartment building, and I think there was a tank shell or some kind of shot fired at him. It severed his arm. He had one arm left, and then there was a drone that went into the building, and there is a picture of him, faces obscured, throwing some kind of stick or piece of lumber at the drone. That's the information we have. Now, the circumstances about exactly how he was killed are still fuzzy, but this is what we know so far.
Israel has confirmed that the Hamas leader behind the October 7 attacks has been killed during a patrol inside Gaza.
The IDF releasing drone vision claiming to show the architect of the October 7 attacks after being chased into a building in Rafah. Defiant until the end, seconds later, an Israeli tank opened fire.
His elimination is an important landmark in the decline of the evil rule of Hamas. Hamas will no longer rule Gaza, and this is an opportunity for you, the residents of Gaza, to finally break free from its tyranny.
This creates an opening that I believe we must take full advantage of to dedicate ourselves to ending this war and bringing the hostages home.
And immediately after his death, there was really hope that this could be a turning point. What were people saying?
They were saying that Sinwar was the person who had been opposing the ceasefire and that there would be a successor who would see the handwriting on the wall, namely that Hamas was on the back foot and would agree to a ceasefire. I happen to disagree with that, but that is the prevailing opinion, certainly in the United States government.
Joe Biden said it was an absolute relief for the world and a step towards ending the war in Gaza. But what we've seen since is anything but that. We've seen more death, more Israeli strikes.
Right.
Israel says it's now trying to eliminate a regrouped Hamas presence in the north of Gaza.
Yes, and they can employ a lot of firepower. I expect that the Hamas leadership will continue the fight because when leaders are killed, there will be others to step into their place. And so I don't expect this war to be over anytime soon.
All right, so hopes of a ceasefire after the death of the Hamas leader haven't been realised yet. And let's talk, Rajan, in a moment about what sort of Hamas it will be without him at the helm. But first, let's look at Israel's actions and what it is actually trying to achieve. Just remind me, what was Israel's stated aim when the war in Gaza began?
When the war in Gaza began, Prime Minister Netanyahu said that the only way that Israel would achieve security is by destroying Hamas.
At the start of the war, I outlined 3 goals: destroy Hamas, free the hostages, and ensure that Gaza doesn't pose a threat to Israel anytime in the future. Achieving these goals will ensure Israel's security and pave the way for additional historic peace agreements with our Arab neighbors.
Now, destroying Hamas can be interpreted in 2 ways, because Hamas is simultaneously a political party, a terrorist group, but also a movement, a popular movement with a fighting force. That fighting force is called the Al-Qassam Brigades. And so it is one thing to say that the military arm of Hamas, the Qassam Brigades, will be destroyed, but defeating Hamas as a movement, which is a grassroots movement that has certain goals, whether one accepts them or not, is going to be a much tougher sell, because in the event that all of the top leaders of Hamas are killed, you have a situation in Gaza where there's such devastation that's taken place that I don't think Hamas or any successor movement will have much difficulty recruiting vengeful young men back to its ranks, I suspect.
Okay, so what is victory for Benjamin Netanyahu in Gaza? Remembering, of course, the death toll, according to the health ministry there, is now above 40,000. So when does it end?
Right. So the death toll, Sam, is reported as 42,000, but I think that, in fact, it's going to be substantially higher because there are still an unknown number of bodies entombed in the rubble. But be that as it may, on the question of where we go from here, there is actually a division even within the Israeli national security establishment, with some saying that the defeat of Hamas is not possible. Moreover, people in the know, that is former senior Israeli commanders, have voiced the same thing. The other day, the head of the Gaza division of the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, the name of the Israeli armed forces, General Gadi Shamni, said not only has Hamas not been destroyed, they are in fact winning the war. Now, one can say he's wrong or he's right. The point is that there's a lack of consensus within people in a position to know in Israel about whether this movement can be militarily destroyed. But that is the goal that Netanyahu has stuck by, no matter what anyone else believes. And the killing of Sinwar, I think, will reinforce his belief that that goal is indeed possible. Now, that means simply that the war will continue, and that anyone who thinks that Sinwar's death will mean a ceasefire today, tomorrow, next week, probably will be disappointed.
And there has been discussion increasingly that perhaps the Israelis and Netanyahu's government plans to annex part of Gaza.
Yes. So the plan now seems to be to create a zone in northern Gaza that is completely devoid of any Palestinians. The way they are planning to do that is to, and they've already done this, to ask Palestinian civilians who are there to evacuate and go to a southern coastal town. And that will leave Hamas operatives behind, presumably, and then to essentially cut aid supplies. So they will be completely devoid of means of sustenance and will be forced to either surrender or they will die or they will leave. The difficulty with that is that the Gazan civilians have been running pillar to post for the better part of over a year now. And they have no confidence that if they go from northern Gaza to a new spot that is declared to be a safe area, that those areas won't in turn be bombed, because that has been the pattern. So I think they are very reluctant to leave where they are because they believe that they will be no safer in the new place that they're being asked to go.
Okay, so let's now turn to Hamas and Yahya Sinwar's successor. Who will it be? Will that person take a harder line? Is there any chance, any prospect that a deal for peace could be reached?
Right. So I will attempt to surmise, and those listening should know that it's a surmise. We don't know exactly who it will be, but one possibility is it will be Sinwar's brother, Mohammed Sinwar. Now, why is that? Yahya Sinwar spent about 20 plus years in an Israeli prison. He was released in a prisoner exchange. The Israelis wanted back a young soldier of theirs, Gilad Shalit, who had been abducted in 2006. They were prepared to release 1,000 Hamas prisoners for that. But Mohammed Sinwar, who was involved in negotiating this prisoner swap, said, no, my brother has to be included in that. So that was done. And so Mohammed Sinwar is a leader in his own right. Do I know for certain that he will be the successor? No, but it is entirely possible. If he is, I don't expect any radical departure from the positions that his brother has taken, that is to continue the fight.
All right, so the fighting will continue in Gaza, and for that matter, of course, now in Lebanon, where Israel is ignoring the United States calls to scale back the strikes, including in and around the capital, Beirut.
One of the things that Hamas has managed to do by provoking this ferocious Israeli war is that it has led ultimately to the political isolation of Israel. That's one thing. The second thing is that the Palestinian problem that had kind of been under everybody's radar, no one was much talking about it, is now front and center. So in this strange way, one could say that even in death, Sinwar has succeeded in that respect. Now, on Lebanon, you mentioned the airstrikes. Well, that is a big problem because even if you try to do precision airstrikes, you take out a large building, for example, surrounding areas could be devastated and civilians will die. But it's more complicated than that because the Israelis have now decided to wage a ground campaign. And based on past history, they have not had luck with ground campaigns against Hezbollah because Hezbollah is a much more powerful foe than Hamas, without question.
How far will the United States and its allies allow Israel to go? Are there any red lines at this point?
So, to be blunt, the allies of the United States don't really much matter here. It really is the United States, which is the prime supporter and arms provider of Israel, its closest and one could say now increasingly only dependable ally. So the real question is, will the United States do the ultimate thing that will get the attention of the Israelis, which would be to withhold military support? I think that is almost inconceivable that will happen generally, but more particularly in an election year. The Biden administration has not shown any willingness to do that, despite the fact that there have been times when they've wanted Bibi Netanyahu, the prime minister, to do something that the Israelis were not willing to do. And the administration was not willing to take the ultimate step. So I don't expect that to happen.
All right. Well, Rajan, tell me then, what is the end point for Israel? When does this end?
This is the $64 million question. No one really knows, because if the war continues and the hostages don't come back, and this is a very, very controversial issue in Israel because many people want them to come back and people want there to be a ceasefire, I think Mr. Netanyahu will have greater and greater difficulty sustaining this war. First, because of problems on the domestic front, people wanting the hostages to come back, but also increasingly because of the political isolation of Israel. And at some point, the United States might decide to get his attention by doing something like making further arms shipments conditional on a ceasefire and so on. But we're a long way from that. But you asked me, what is the end game here? I've tried to understand what the Prime Minister's end game is, and I have to tell you, I don't really understand what it is. We are now over a year into the war. The IDF is one of the world's most proficient armies. It has enormous firepower. Hamas is a manifestly weaker foe, but it has not been able to bring Hamas to its knees, let alone to destroy it. Are we anywhere closer to that goal of the Prime Minister's being met? I don't see it. I don't think very many other people see it, but it doesn't matter what I think. There are people in Israel who are now doubting whether this is possible. Logically speaking, this could be an open-ended war. So I don't know how many years it will last or how many months it will last. All I can tell you is there's no light at the end of the tunnel insofar as any kind of ceasefire, let alone a political settlement, is concerned.
Rajan Menon is a professor at the City College of New York. This episode was produced by Sydney Peed and Cara Jensen McKinnon. Audio production by Sam Dunn. Our supervising producer is David Cody. I'm Sam Hawley. Thanks for listening.